And moving on, the UN Human Rights Council kicked off the new year. Who are its newest members? Well, countries such as Cuba, Qatar, China, Sudan, Eritrea, Algeria, Somalia, Vietnam, Pakistan, and others, all exemplary models of human rights. This is the latest after the world body overwhelmingly voted last week to ask the International Court of Justice to take a stand on the legal status of the so-called Israeli occupation. Its obsession with Israel continuing. And once again, seriously calling into question the legitimacy of the UN and its resolutions. Joining us now to discuss all of this is Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of the United Nations Watch. Hillel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's start with the UN Human Rights Council. I mean, how do you explain the fact that 70% of its members are non-democratic councils with, many with major human rights violations of their own?
Look, Lidar, I believe the world needs a credible human rights council to defend millions of victims in places like Iran, Syria, North Korea, who are suffering arbitrary executions, torture, imprisonment, rape, and they need to be defended. When the world elects regimes that you mentioned, like China, Cuba, Pakistan, to its highest human rights body, that's like naming Al Capone and his gang to fight organized crime. It's a betrayal.
And I mean, this double standard, how can the world be expected to take the Council's decisions seriously?
There is a serious credibility gap, as you mentioned, when 70% of the members of the UN Human Rights Council are either full-on tyrannies, like China and Cuba, that are police states, authoritarian regimes like Qatar and Pakistan, that mistreat women, migrants. It's very hard for the world to take it seriously, and it raises questions about how they can even implement mandates that are positive, like they created an inquiry on Iran. Who's going to be running the inquiry? When you know who the members of the Human Rights Council are, it raises questions, it undermines the credibility of the entire operation.
And we know that the UN in general, and the UN Human Rights Council in particular, has this sort of, let's call it an obsession with Israel. We've seen countless resolutions on Israel, while other, nations have received, nations with really questionable human rights records have received zero resolutions about them. Why do you believe this is the case? Why this obsession with Israel?
Well, there are many factors at play. These resolutions are introduced by the Arab and Islamic states, historically to deflect attention from their own records, and it's their narrative to demonize Israel. And they have the power. They have the oil historically. Countries vote with them for that. There's vote trading. The Islamic nations are 56 nations. The Jewish countries, there's just one. Countries are afraid of inviting terrorism if they dare to be the few who will stand against this automatic majority against Israel. And let's face it, there's also today what we call the new anti-Semitism. If once in the Middle Ages, when there was the Black Plague, they said the Jew is poisoning the wells, today if there's human rights abuse and problems in the world, it's the Jewish state that gets the General Assembly last year. We had one resolution on Iran, one on North Korea, one on Syria, and 15 on the Jewish state. So there's no question that Israel today plays the role of the Jewish scapegoat.
And now I want to also ask about the recent vote in the UN General Assembly against Israel. Even some of Israel's newest allies, as you mentioned, some of the Arab states, voting against us. What does Israel need to do at the UN to change this ridiculous obsession, or is this going to continue to be the norm?
Well, it's been the norm for many years, and you mentioned the new Arab states. It's hard to expect them to vote for Israel when even countries that Israel has excellent bilateral relations with for many years, countries like Singapore or others, vote against Israel. So it has become the default, and Israel needs to work hard to change it. It's very much an uphill battle. It has to begin with Israel's closest allies. In the democratic world, sometimes, last week, countries like Germany, Canada, Australia, they voted for Israel. Others, like Luxembourg, did not. And Israel has to make the case among its allies, and it's obviously continues to be very much an uphill battle, but countries need to realize that this obsession is not only bad for the peace process, polarizes the Israeli and Arab sides, but it's bad for the world. All this time spent on demonizing Israel is time not spent on human rights abuses in Zimbabwe, in Cuba, and Pakistan, and that's part of the strategy of these countries.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Hillel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and for the work that you do in the UN.
Thank you.